This tip is something I haven't really heard a lot of people talk about, and that's hey, so I'm Bridget. If this is your first time here, welcome. I am a wife, a mom to a 2-year-old, and I am also a certified travel consultant. I have been blessed to have gone to several different countries and continents, and so I'm here to share my experience and knowledge with you today. Okay, so in this video, I'll give you over 25 important tips that you need to know to make your first trip to Europe less intimidating, and I'll answer some questions like, in 2017, I planned my first trip to Europe all by myself. I was so proud of myself. We had an amazing time. I went with my boyfriend at the time, now husband, and his best friend, my now close friend, Tim. And we had a ball, y'all. So if I was able to do that in my early 20s by myself, you can definitely do it too. Okay, so some quick housekeeping items. This video is a good overview and a good starting point. I will be making more videos that are specific to families with young children, because that's the era that I'm in. And I'll also be making more videos that are country specific. So be sure that you are subscribed to get notified when those videos post. Also, timestamps will be down below if you want to jump to a specific part. Okay, I think that's it. If you're ready to get started, grab a notepad or open up your notes app and let's jump right in. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the number one thing you should research before you even start booking flights or considering the time that you want to travel. And that's going to be national holidays of the country you're visiting. And you don't want to visit Italy during a time where most businesses are closed or tourist attractions are closed. You want to go when things are open so you can experience the real Italy. It's the number one thing a lot of people want to know, and that's, how do I find the best flight? So for some people, the best flight is the cheapest flight. For other people, that's the most direct flight. Whatever that means to you, these are my top 4 places that I like to look for a flight. And that is on Google Flights, of course, Skyscanner, Momondo, and Hopper. I like Skyscanner and Momondo because you can put in just a month and it'll tell you the best deal as far as like the cheapest flight and the most direct flight. And also I like Hopper because it will track the price of the flight. If it goes up or down, it'll tell you when's the best time to book your flight. Okay, so after flights, what should you book? That's gonna be accommodations. For accommodations, the sooner you book, the better the price is gonna be. Trust me. Also, everybody has different opinions on this, whether to go Airbnb or hotel. And honestly, that is up to you and your preferences. So if you have a family and you want more space, if you need a washer and dryer, if you need a kitchen, if you need space for kids to run, you're going to want to go Airbnb because most European hotels are on the smaller side. However, some people love the hotel experience. If they're on vacation, they want to feel like they're on vacation, and that means hotels for them. It's completely up to you and your preference. Whatever it is, you want to book as soon as possible. As far as your itinerary goes, trust me on this one, you do not want to make it jam-packed. You do not want to try to do all the things in a week. It's just not possible. So if you're spending maybe a month or more, okay, then you have time to do all the things. But a week or less, pick the things that are most important to you and stick with that. You want to spend at minimum 5 days in one location. So if you're going overseas and you think that you're about to go to 5 different cities in a week, that sounds like a horrible idea. Even within 10 days, like that's just not, it's not good. Trust me, you will burn out, the jet lag will kick in, and you will be miserable. Okay, another key point about your itinerary is to map it out ahead of time on Google Maps. So on Google Maps, you can go in and plug in your destinations and just see, does it make sense as far as transit times? If it takes you 12 hours to get to one location, does it make sense to only spend a day or two there? Think about that ahead of time and map it out. So the next piece of advice about pre-planning is more about what happens at home while you're away. Most times when you go overseas, you're going to spend more than 5 days typically. Usually it's about 7 to 10 days or more. And so with that being said, you might need to pre-schedule yard maintenance ahead of time. You might need to schedule your bills on auto pay. Also think about pet care and backup plans or emergency plans if your pet care falls through or something happens. I know for us, when we went overseas but our dog, we needed somebody to take care of her. We were living in a city where we didn't really know people. And so I ended up using the app called Rover, and we found an amazing pet sitter who was able to come and stay with our dog the entire time. Speaking of, So that was her cue, apparently. She's only been boarded once, and that was a terrible experience. And so now we just prefer people that we know or trust to watch her. My number one recommendation as a travel consultant is to use travel.state.gov to make sure that you have all the necessary entry travel documents. That includes passports, visas, anything else you may need, as well as immunizations or vaccinations. It will tell you everything you need to know for that specific country that you're visiting. This one is not specific to Europe. It is just for international travel in general, but you want to make sure that your passport is valid for at least 6 months after your return date. A lot of countries require you to have a valid passport for at least that amount of time in case anything happens, like a medical emergency, and you have to stay in that country longer. You want to check the travel.state.gov site because some countries require longer than 6 months. Some require 12 to 18 months. Next, we're going to talk about documents you need if you plan on renting or driving a car overseas in Europe. And that's to check if you need an international driver's license. I have more tips on that if you need to know more information, or you can just do a quick Google search, but it will let you know if the countries that you're traveling to require that. Next, we're going to talk about some must-have packing essentials for Europe. So let's start with your power adapter. Outlets in Europe are different from the ones in the United States. You're going to want to bring a power adapter so that your appliances, your chargers will fit into the outlets. Another thing is a portable charging bank. I bring two. I have a really small one that can fit into my phone and charge as I'm walking. And then I have it's not really big. It's about this size, and it just holds a really long charge so that if I'm out and about, I'm using Google Translate a lot, or I'm using my maps a lot, my phone battery is going to die. And so you don't want to have to sit somewhere, plug it in. That way you can just be on the go and have it with you and it's charging. This tip is something I haven't really heard a lot of people talk about, and that's bringing your own washcloth or loofah. Most European hotels do not provide these for guests. That's something drastically different from the US. But honestly, I prefer to use my own personal washcloth and loofah anyways, just because I'm a germaphobe. But you will definitely need to bring this with you to Europe. This tip is not just for Europe, it's for most international travel, and that's to pack a blue or black pen with you on your carry-on and have it readily accessible for filling out customs declaration forms. This wasn't my first international trip, but it was my first trip as an adult, and that was to Dominican Republic in my early 20s. And we had to fill out the customs declaration form on the plane before getting off. And I remember a lot of people asking for pens to share because you can't use a pencil. And by nature, I'm a planner and I just love to have things prepared. So I had a pen, but about 5 different people used my pen that day. I remember that like yesterday. So just make sure that you have that with you so you can just fill it out on your own. This one is not like crucial for some people, but it was for me. It is for me, and I always bring chapstick. The air on airplanes, it's so drying, and having chapped lips or just dry lips is so uncomfortable. It's just one of those comfort items. And so chapstick is in my top 5. Also specific to Europe, make sure that you carry tissues. Now I say tissues because not every bathroom that you go to or public bathroom has tissue, and some have you pay extra to use tissue. So you just want to have that on hand. Okay, this one is a little controversial too, and that's whether to do carry-on only or to check your luggage. Now for me, I'm a minimalist and I believe carrying light is best. But specifically for Europe, I think it's best because international travel can be stressful already, and it just makes navigating the airport a lot easier. You don't have to make an additional stop to check your bag. Another reason is more peace of mind. You don't have to worry about lost luggage. That's another stress. Thankfully, that has never happened to me yet, and I pray it never does. This is important because a lot of European airlines have stricter carry-on measurements. So you want to double check the airline's carry-on measurements before you start packing or selecting what luggage you're going to bring. I would say to be on the safe side to always stick with the smallest carry-on that you have. Okay, this is the fun one. Money and budgeting. Number 1, if you're using a credit card, which I do recommend, make sure you're using one that has 0% foreign transaction fees. You don't want to be over there swiping your card and then come back home and realize that you have all these fees stacked up on top of what you already paid for. Most times that foreign transaction fee is about 3%, I believe, and you don't want to pay extra money. This is not a sponsorship, but my personal card that I use when I travel internationally is a Capital One card, but there's many out there. So just check and see if the ones that you already have 0% foreign transaction fees. This is another one to just keep your money safe, and that's to make sure you have a mix of payments in different places. Don't keep all your cards or money in your wallet, because if that wallet gets stolen, you are SOL. So when I'm traveling, whether that's solo or with my family, I make sure that I have some money in my purse. I have it in my carry-on at the hotel or Airbnb. I keep some in my special compartments. I have a scarf that has a zip up, and you can like put a few things in there. I'll keep it in there. Just have it in multiple places. Okay, so of course, this one is let your bank or your card issuer know that you're going to be traveling, what your travel plans are. You don't want to be overseas trying to use your card and then you swipe it and your credit card company or your bank is like, hola. This person lives in Utah. Why is their card being used in Paris? And they immediately shut it down because they think it's fraudulent activity. You want to prepare it ahead of time, let your bank and your card issuer know. Also, overseas, be mindful that a lot of places do not take Amex, American Express, or Discover sometimes. So you want to stick with Visa and MasterCard in my experience. Next, we're going to talk about ways to save money with certain activities when you're traveling to Europe. My number one recommendation to do in your first 1 to 2 days in a new country, is to do a walking tour of some sort. You can do a paid walking tour, but there's also many free walking tours that locals provide. Doing a walking tour on your first or second day there kind of gives you the lay of the land and helps you scope out different places that you normally wouldn't know about, that only locals know about, and it's a good preview of the country. There's a few sites that I like to book my walking tours on, but you can check that down below. This one also saves you money and time, and that's to pre-purchase your tourist attraction tickets. I remember when we were in Paris that we pre-purchased our Louvre tickets, and I'm so glad we did. That line was outrageous. We saved at least an hour just by purchasing online, even the day before. This one is a big one, and I recommend this to all of my travel clients, and that's travel insurance. And it's not just like, oh, of course, insurance, but no, you need travel insurance, because no one ever thinks they need insurance until they need it. Always get travel insurance. I had a client who had a mistake with the gas pumps overseas with their rental car. In Europe, the diesel is the black pump and the unleaded petrol gas is the green pump. Obviously, in the United States, that's switched. So they end up putting diesel in their car instead of regular unleaded, and you can imagine what happened. Thankfully, they had travel insurance that covered majority of that cost, and so thank God that they did. Okay, so what are your options for staying connected to your friends and family back home? One of the most important things is to check with your phone carrier beforehand to see if there's an international phone plan. Also, using an eSIM is a good idea, and it allows you to use your data overseas. Another tip that I have done personally and that has helped my clients is to turn off the roaming, especially if you're using an eSIM. It just gives you better access to your data. Okay, I'm sure you already know this, but WhatsApp is very good for communicating with your friends and family. It works over Wi-Fi. So even if you don't get your international travel plan with your phone company, you'll still be able to not text, but message your family. These next tips are going to help you navigate around European countries. So when you're going overseas to Europe, unless you're going to England and a few other places that speak English primarily, Google Translate is going to be your best friend. My recommendation is, if you've never used Google Translate before, try using it at home before you start traveling, and it just takes down the pressure and the anxiety of using a new tool. Oh, and make sure that you download it for offline use, so that if you don't have any Wi-Fi connection for some reason, you're still able to use Google Translate. On the same wave, I'm going to recommend Google Maps, and I recommend downloading the areas that you're visiting and download those for offline use. Next tip is to download the airlines app. Most airlines have their own specific apps: Southwest, American, Delta, United, you name it. Make sure that you download that app. It will help you with check-ins. It will notify you if there's any delays. They will notify you if there's any gate change. It's super important. This app is similar, and my husband put me onto this, and it's called App in the Air. And it was very helpful, specifically if you're traveling with Southwest, because you have to check in 24 hours ahead of time. And that kind of dictates your boarding order as far as your group, A, B, C, whatever. App in the Air automatically checks in for you and does the work for you. It's amazing. Highly recommend. It's not sponsored. Download it. The link will be in the description box below. Another important and new app is the MPC app, and it's mobile passport control. That will save you so much time going through customs on the way back to the United States. Highly recommend. Even if you have global entry, I would say to download it as a backup. Another app that will help you navigate overseas is the Turo app. This is specific to people who want to rent a car in Europe. It's not available in every European country. I believe right now it is in the UK, France, and Germany. There may be more, but double check that. And Turo is just a peer-to-peer car rental service, and it allows regular people to rent out their cars to you. Our first experience using Turo was in Hawaii. Yes, I know that's not international travel. However, it was so helpful and cheaper than the other car rental services. And they also added extra goodies like a picnic blanket, a cooler that we could use for the beach, some boogie boards. It was really helpful and gave us some extras that we wouldn't normally get with a regular car rental. Also, we used it in Miami. That was helpful because it came with a car seat that we needed for our son. So we didn't have to haul the car seat with us traveling from the airport. This tip is more general to any international travel, not just Europe. And that's just to make sure that you learn the basics of the culture that you're visiting. You don't want to unintentionally disrespect or offend someone. This can include appropriate attire. For instance, when you visit the Sistine Chapel, you have to have your shoulders covered. They cannot be bare like this. You have to wear long trousers or skirts. This can also include tipping customs. Some people may have the perspective that you don't have to tip in Europe, but it is expected in certain countries like Greece and Spain. You also want to be aware of just some basic local laws. You don't have to know everything, but there are some photography laws that can differ by country. For instance, there's no photography allowed of any government buildings in Algeria. There's also a photography law in the red light district in Amsterdam, in case you end up visiting there to just see what's going on. You are not allowed to photograph anything, anyone in the red light district. This might be a perception too that you can just drink in public parks and spaces in Europe, but not every country is the same. So make sure that you research that ahead of time. I know that it is mostly illegal in Nordic countries like Norway, Denmark, and Sweden. You are not allowed to drink in public spaces. However, you are allowed in France. Another thing to be aware of is when you're dining, I've seen some Americans kind of just waiting to be seated because that's kind of custom here. But in Europe, in some countries, it's just seat yourself and you pick your own table. So just know that too. All right, my US citizens. We are like one of the only countries that uses the imperial system. And so just learning the basics of the metric system, being able to convert a few things as far as kilometers to mile or miles to kilometers, whatever the case may be. This is probably the most important thing I think when you're visiting a new country, and that's just simply to be humble and to have the mindset that you're a guest in their country. I know the perception of the world sometimes is that Americans are arrogant and we want everyone to cater to us. That's not true. We don't all believe that, and I don't really have to tell most people like, just be a little more humble when you're overseas. Don't expect everybody to know English. Try to learn their language. Try to say please and thank you in their language at the bare minimum. Okay, shameless plug. Don't forget to sign up for my free newsletter down below. In that newsletter, I give you tips and tricks for different countries each week. So speaking of learning a few languages, this app is something that I've been using for about 2 years now, and I love it. It has helped me learn so much more Spanish, and that's Duolingo. It's not sponsored. It's just helpful for me, and I've recommended it to some of my clients as well. And it's just a language learning app. There's a free version and there's a paid version. It helps you learn a few basic keywords that we were just talking about. So thank you, please. Or it could help you learn more than that. It just really depends on what your goal is. This next tip helps make your experience more enjoyable. And my tip is to visit any tourist attractions that you want to visit in the early morning as soon as it opens, or in the late afternoon or evening closer to when it's going to close. By doing this, you avoid the tour groups, the crowds, and it allows you to enjoy those tourist attractions more leisurely, with space, less stress, less overwhelm, and I highly recommend doing that. Okay, airport tips. I know that going somewhere new can be exciting, but also cause some anxiety. And so the more you know, the less fear you have. This tip is important not just for international travel, domestic as well. And that's when you're going through security clearance, TSA, or whatever. You want to make sure that you send your valuables and your electronics last through the screening. If you send them first, and you don't clear security at the same time that your things are coming through the x-ray scanner, you risk someone intentionally or mistakenly taking your item. And I've seen it happen before. Also, if you're packing your own food or snacks for the plane ride, which I do recommend, make sure you're aware of the agricultural regulations of the country you're visiting. Some countries prohibit dairy, meat, fruit, nuts, certain products from going or entering into their country, just for like pest control reasons. And so if you pack one of those prohibited items, it will not be allowed off of the airplane. Staying hydrated is important, especially because, like I said earlier, the airplanes can be so drying. And the water in the airport is expensive. So I know a lot of people are like, oh, but you can't bring water through security. Yeah, that's true, but you can bring an empty water bottle. So I always like to use a reusable water bottle, or a collapsible one, even better, if you can find that. You can collapse it down, pack it in your carry-on, and then once you clear security, you just go fill it up at a water fountain. It's free, and what's better than free? All right, so this next tip is for people like me who like to push it to the edge as far as arriving to the airport. Okay, so in the past, especially with domestic flights, I've arrived to the airport in like an hour before my flight, especially because I have TSA pre-check and global entry. I'm like, oh, I can clear TSA pretty quickly. I'm having a carry-on. I don't need to check a bag. And that has worked for me, although I've cut it a little close once or twice. But with international flights, you do not want to play that game. You want to get there 2.5 to 3 hours before your flight, because more documents need to be checked. Security might be longer. You don't want to play the game of missing your flight. You've done all the planning and research just to miss a flight. Don't do that. Another important airport tip, especially if you have young kids, is to think about the entertainment beforehand. So that is the one time where my son is allowed to have his tablet. But with that being said, we make sure that we pre-download his favorite episodes or movies, have that pre-downloaded, as well as any audiobooks that you want to listen to. Another thing I like to do to pass time is to free up storage on my phone. So when we're flying, I'll look through my phone and be like, oh, that picture's blurry, let's delete that. Clear out the space, because you're gonna wanna take pictures and videos, and the worst thing is when you're about to take a video or a picture and you don't have any more storage left, and then you have to do that in the moment. So make sure you free up storage or add more storage beforehand. How can you stay healthy when you're traveling? Number one, eat where the locals eat. That's important, and you want to choose a place that seems to be more busy or more popular, because that means a higher turnover of food, and food isn't just sitting there all day, and you're less likely to get a stomach bug of some sort. Also, prep beforehand. 2 to 4 weeks before your trip, I like to take probiotics, vitamin D, have zinc on hand in case you do catch a little cold. Zinc is scientifically proven to shorten the length of the cold in case you do catch something. So I highly recommend packing that with you. You may or may not know this, but you're gonna walk a lot more in Europe than you do at home. And because of that, you wanna build up some stamina ahead of time, or sort of train, so to speak. Quick story time. The friend I mentioned earlier on, our friend Tim, this was his first international trip, so he was so excited. And the day before, he went a little overboard. So we flew out of JFK in New York City, and so he walked like all of Manhattan, and he did easily like 15,000 steps in one day. And by the time that we got to London, which was our first city, we had to stop at the pharmacy and get some Tylenol for him because his knee hurt so bad. And yeah, so with that excitement, you can easily overdo it. And I don't want that to happen to you. So yeah, just train maybe a few weeks before, walk more than you normally would. You don't have to walk 15,000 steps right off the bat, kind of work up to that. And with that being said, make sure that you break in the shoes that you're going to be wearing. With our friend Tim, he also had to buy new shoes in Barcelona because of all the walking we were doing. It wore through the sole of his shoe. So yeah, you don't have to wear new shoes, but also just make sure like your shoes can handle all the walking. You will easily do 18,000 steps in a day. Yeah, so break in your shoes, but not too much. Those are just some quick health precautions you can take beforehand. Now we're going to move on to safety. Okay, so my recommendation is to know where the US Embassy or consulate is located in each city or country that you're visiting. I don't want to be a pessimist, but I kind of prepare for the worst. So in case anything happens, you lose your passport, anything like that, you want to make sure that you know where to go in case that happens. Speaking of passports, you also want to have a color photocopy of your passport, at least one, maybe two. You also want to give a copy to someone that you trust, someone that's not traveling with you in case you need to reference. Okay, so this tip is to have a game plan when you arrive to your destination. You don't want to look lost. You want to make sure you have a game plan, you have an idea of what transportation you're going to take. You don't want to be wandering and be like, where should I go? Look like you belong. If you don't, you're making yourself an easy target for scammers, and I don't want that to happen to you. On the same wave, you also want to just be generally aware of what's going on around you. You don't want to look paranoid, but just know what's going on in general. Another tip, this is for domestic, international flights, any flight. If someone asks you to watch their back for them, don't do it. Yes, you may be a super friendly person at home, but when you're traveling, you have to be on a little higher alert and not just so easily trusting. You never know what that person has in that bag. It could be illegal. If security comes and assumes that that's your bag, they can take you into security. That can be a whole other situation. Another safety precaution is to always give your itinerary to someone that you trust back home. Always have somebody know what's going on, where you plan to be at this time. And there's apps that can help you share that information as well. TripIt is one app that you can use, but there's many out there. Okay, so this next tip is for pickpockets. This doesn't just happen in Europe, it can happen anywhere in the world, but just be on higher alert. Make sure you have a money belt. Now, that money belt isn't something that you should be using every time you want to pay for something. You want it to be kind of discreet and have your backup money in case anything happens, or your IDs, that photocopy of your passport you can keep in that money belt. And they make money belts now to be really slim and it can fit underneath your clothes so nobody knows you have one. Our first time to Europe, we went in April, and so it was a little bit chilly. And so I had a scarf that I had. And again, the scarf was amazing. Let me grab it actually. Okay, so this is the scarf. I had a white one, but the same brand that I used. And it's cute, just a wraparound scarf. But what makes it so amazing and different is that it has a built-in zipper pocket. So here's the zipper. And it's a pretty big storage space. Not sponsored again, but this is the brand. And so I just kept the copy of my passport in here, a credit card, I think, and some cash. So discreet, nobody knew, but I didn't constantly go in here to pay for things. This was my last resort. Okay, this is my last tip as far as safety precautions for this general video, and that's just to not stick out in a crowd. Don't wear your super expensive jewelry. Keep those at home. A few of my clients don't even wear their real wedding rings when they travel. They decide to just go to Target and get a little cheap but cute ring, and they'll wear that instead just because it makes them feel safer to not have expensive jewelry on them. So this next tip, you can take it or leave it, honestly. Wear what you want to wear. I know that I love a good baseball cap, but in Europe, you will definitely stick out as an American tourist if you wear a baseball cap, if you wear cargo pants. Overseas, they dress to impress, okay? And I love that as well. So if you want to fit in and feel like a local, just be mindful of that. Okay guys, thanks for sticking with me. I know this was not a super short video. And if you made it to the end, and if you would like me to talk about a specific country, comment down below what that country is and like this video. Thank you so much, and I hope that this was helpful.